Well, welcome to another episode of Kardia Conversations. I'm here with Jarrod Hoffman, one of the providers at Kardia Collective, where we seek to provide care for people to live more with courage, hope, and freedom is one of our main desired outcomes for why we exist. And so I'm excited about my conversation with Jarrod, who works a lot with teens and adolescents and thus parents. We put you in probably a systems category of working with the system as a whole to help produce most responsible and positive outcomes. But a lot of our conversation, Jarrod, and a lot of the work you're doing seems to fit in this category around parents partnering with their kids, especially teens and adolescents and young adults, to really orient themselves toward meaningful action, toward areas of interest, toward areas of responsibility. So really curious about what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, and hopefully this conversation can be helpful for parents of kids within that range to better equip us to walk alongside of them in a more fruitful, productive manner. But what are some of the things you're seeing and learning in your work?
Yeah, I mostly see 12 to 22 as far as age, and parents are involved in most of that. Caregivers are involved in most of that. I think the normal words we would use is some anxiety, some depression, and what I feel like I see is a lack of purpose a lot of times. And
the kids, teens, young adults.
Yes, or the purpose isn't their own, or the purpose isn't big enough, right? There's almost a movement of like, well, it's just what I feel and what I think, and if there's no bigger system that you're a part of and experiencing purpose from, then it's just all selfishness. And so I see anxiety about a fear about the future, depression about the present, and a lot of it has to do with purpose and meaning, I think. And then you have the parent, the caregiver, who expects potentially a different purpose for their life. I think any of our lives come into conflict when our values are different.
So and I don't know what the relationship is between purpose. One of the conversations we had with Jason Stubbs recently was like resiliency, and it makes me curious too about the relationship between purpose of anybody, and that I would correlate that with some intrinsic motivator. Like there's an internal drive, a picture of the future that I'm interested in and curious about and willing to pursue and even make sacrifices for, and then how that even creates resiliency in us, like because what we're pursuing is worth the difficulty. So I don't know if you see that, if those two things correlate in your experience, but how so this it sounds like there is a sense of this imposed purpose, maybe from us as parents saying this is how I want you to be and how I want you to live, and then how people adapt to that or react to that and how that affects them. So how do we negotiate or navigate that and change that? Or it sounds like we need to reorient that or reverse it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things at play, and probably one of the biggest places we see that is if the child goes off to college or goes off to the next step or whatever that might be, and their purpose wasn't their own, then we're going to find that out in the next year, 2, 3, definitely by 10 years. The common thing is, oh, well, I don't use what I majored in. Well, was what you were majoring in your choice? Really? Your passion, your purpose? Or was it the expectation of engineers make a lot of money, and we've invested a lot of money in your education, and so you need to be able to pay that back, and I hope you get some scholarships along the way because it's going to be really expensive. And so I feel like you see that. Maybe you experience some conflict in the early or late teen years as they're trying to figure out high school or whatnot. But certainly if they don't have a purpose bigger than themselves or that's not on someone else, after they get out of high school and they're on their next step, that's going to become apparent. So I feel like I see that as people either drop out or they major in something and then they get the job after college and it sucks and they don't actually like what they're doing. And then you can also see that in the teen years as their schedules might be filled with things that they hate. I mean, how many of us adults could make it through a week of a high school schedule and feel like we're coming out positive? I think I'd have anxiety and depression if I had to do what is expected of a lot of students.
How they perform at that level. Yeah, so I've got a 22, 20, 18, and 16-year-old, so I'm filtering as you're talking, thinking about, it feels like one of the, because some kids come out with a very clear interest, like I'm interested in this thing and I gravitate toward that thing and I pursue that thing and it's like really obvious, and they've wanted to be a veterinarian since they were 5 years old and that's all they've ever talked about. And I don't know how common that is, but that is sometimes it happens. And then it does seem like in a lot of cases they don't know. So how are you helping some of these kids identify that purpose, name that purpose, organize themselves around it? Because I do agree with you, like in my own experience, just my own life, like I am willing to suffer and sacrifice and endure for things I really care about, without resentment and bitterness if it's what I care about. But if it's imposed upon me, then it's more drudgery. So helping kids and young adults articulate that feels harder.
You said the word resilience. I think that's brilliant. Challenge comes with that. You have to have challenge and resistance to even know if you can be resilient. And one of the things that I love about the people that I work with is that, man, they are resilient. They overcome these obstacles, but the obstacle is necessary. What did you want to do as a high schooler?
I don't know. I really don't know.
And you look back and you go, was that such a bad thing?
No.
How come?
Well, you try things, you experiment with things, you explore things. Now, there was a bit of a defined path, like this is what we've done as a family, this is what your siblings did. So there was a range. Now, to explore outside of that range was probably, it was less encouraged, right? So it's like within the athletic and musical realm, great, but you move beyond that. Whether it was, outdoors activities or other, artistic expressions, those may not have been as, encouraged. So it was within a framework.
Is this within that framework? Kardia?
No, not at all.
But it might be one of the things you're most proud of.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the things the transferable skills and the willingness to be exposed, to put yourself out there, to take risks in some of those more secure environments, I think have definitely translated, or transferred into the here and the now. But the field or the scope of it could go radically different. Right.
So I think the hope is that you are giving the people we're working with purpose, that whatever you're doing right now, one of my favorite questions is, okay, you're experiencing an obstacle right now. When have you overcome an obstacle in the past? And they have examples of that. If I expect that their overcoming of the obstacle is what I think it should be, that's where we get into trouble. And so if the lane is so narrow of the purpose, and we forget that resilience and some of these traits that exist beyond whatever they're doing right now, that's what we want to cultivate. I love the word virtue, right? Integrity, responsibility, some of these things that are going to be present with them, whatever job they do.
Right.
And particularly, we'd rather them have the virtue and have a job that may not pay as much than the reverse of no virtue and, man, they made it as a doctor.
And are potentially heartless in the work. There's a lot to consider in this conversation. A lot of nuances and complexity to it, because at the same time, I see and hear us as parents wanting to alleviate those obstacles, and we spend a lot of energy trying to help them avoid them. And I do think as my kids have become young adults, it's going, these obstacles are opportunities. And I know that sounds cliche, but letting them wrestle and struggle and suffer even from the consequences of some of their own decision making, which is really hard to do. But I think so much of the anxiety we bring into our parenting is attempting to avoid obstacles or pain or setback or loss, when in reality that is probably some of the most formative experiences that any of us could have. So that's really challenging.
It makes me think of something that happened a couple of months ago now. I was at a skate party. I'm not a roller skater by any means, but I found myself there, and I was handling the food and the drinks, and one of the kids that I know came up, and maybe 6 or 7, and said, "Where are the juice boxes?" And he comes up and I point to it, and he gets it out. It's one of those Capri Suns or whatever. And his first reaction, he hands it to me. Right. And this kid's 7 or something. And all of me wanted to go, I can envision some scenarios where this ends badly if I don't do it for him.
Right.
It's leaking all over the floor. He gets another one.
Those are those pouches, right? You got to hold the straw. Exactly. There's a right way to open it.
But he's 7. He can do this 100%. So I said, I'm pretty sure you can do that by yourself. Even though the consequences could be some failure and some tears and juice all over me. And he goes, ugh. And he takes the plastic off and unwraps it and stabs it, but with the flat end, like not even looking at it. And then he hands it back, goes to hand it back to me. And I said, I think there might be another end to that. And he rolls his eyes again, turns around, stabs it, and walks off.
He did it.
If he wouldn't have been able to accomplish it, I think it would have been more valuable than me doing it for him in the first place. And so now he has I think about the counseling, he has the empowerment that, no, this is something that I can do. And if I don't know how to do it, I will find the resources to figure it out. It's a lot more purposeful in the way that they're attacking those problems than, well, these people think I should do it this way, which, by the way, and we don't need to talk about it too much, but like that's what they're hearing in technology and social media is like, oh, you need to do it this way.
Yeah. So helping our kids see a purpose, develop that purpose, define it, pursue it. What other advice or practical conversations are you seeing or having to help kind of draw that out?
Yeah. I think of the phrase, like, I can't get them to be motivated to do something.
Right.
I think that comes from what you're saying, and I'm sitting here going, okay, how am I supposed to motivate to do something? And one of the key takeaways I have from learning about a type of therapy called motivational interviewing, which is just increasing or pulling out their motivation, because it exists. It might not be in that form or for that thing, but maybe something, is the challenge of being not being a stakeholder. Hey, if you don't do your homework and you come back in here, I am still with you. I don't think any less of you. I think that's very challenging as a parent or a caregiver, because now I'm taking that on me. I'm not doing a good job. And while I struggle with that sometimes as a therapist, oh man, I could have done better, it's ultimately on them if they want to change, and I can come alongside. And so I think advice I would give to parents or a caregiver or even like a coach or something is, we want to elicit the change talk, as they say. We want to elicit their desire to change. So maybe an example is, I have this project coming up in a class, right? That comes up all the time. I'm feeling anxious about it. I don't even want to get out of bed. Why would I want to focus on this project? Maybe the class isn't very exciting to me, but the parent, the caregiver is signaling for virtue, right? You're going to show up, you're going to do your best and try. I'm on board with that. But how many parents come in and they did the science fair project, right? There's no way a 7-year-old did that.
Right.
And maybe we have to do some heart searching on like, this says more about me than it does the child.
Right.
And what if people think about me like, oh, their kid couldn't even make it in with this put together project. Maybe it's better use of their time to focus on science or, another subject that they are way more passionate about. I don't know. That's kind of what's coming to mind.
Well, yeah, and going back to the idea of letting them struggle, letting them suffer, letting them experience some of those consequences, even the potential shame of showing up with a job poorly done, of needing that experience as a potential motivator for doing it differently in the future, not with the intent for them to fail, but also letting them experience some of that stuff, I think is resiliency training, if you will. So, and you touched on something that I've felt. I can represent myself of the vanity of, as a parent, of how much I take on the identity of my kids' performances and how that reflects on me versus the desired differentiation of like, I care a lot about how their life goes, and my identity is not threatened by how good, and that I think is part of the secret sauce of being able to show up alongside of versus over, right? Like I can come alongside of you if my identity is not at stake. And again, easier said than done. That's why parents, we've got to go do our own work. We've got to keep doing our own healing and recovery and make sure that we're not using our kids to prop our egos up, which is again, easier said than done sometimes. But if we put that weight on them, that's part of what I hear you saying that is more oppressive than freeing.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to, I think, cultivate a space where they can be free to pursue the things that they're naturally interested in with the guidance and safety of our care. I don't know if you'd put in those terms, but.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
What else would you add? What have we not talked? So you did mention motivational interviewing, which I think I'd like you to expound on that a little bit more. I'd not heard that term before.
Yeah, it's just a way. Really, some people would argue that it's not a theory of counseling, but it's more of a way of talking and sharing. One of the big things is that I am not going to, I'm going to let you decide where we go. But I'm also going to be listening for where do you want to go? What change do you want to make? And some people are in varying stages of where they want to, do they even want to make a change? Do they see that it's necessary? And a lot of it is honestly like a take-home idea is reflecting back what somebody says. And because a lot of times we talk to our friends so that we can hear ourselves talk. And so that's what I do sometimes is I just say exactly what I felt like they said to me, maybe in different words. And it's amazing what will happen. So if you're a parent or a caregiver, and you don't know what to say and you don't have the answer, that's probably a good place to be. And then just say back where you think you are. I'll give you an example, right? They say this project is coming up in English and I do not even know where to start. This teacher's got me, or they have it out for me, and the last one didn't go well, and blah blah blah. And I might say, man, you've tried just about everything, and the teacher doesn't even like you. I wonder what you're gonna do.
What options do you have?
And I could have just said, hey, you probably need to study 2 hours, work on it, go up to your room, get rid of the distractions. But more than likely, if I just say, I wonder what you do about a situation like that, that sounds really challenging. So I'm meeting them in the experience.
Attuning with them.
Attuning with them, reflecting them. And 9 times out of 10, they go, well, I guess I just need to crank it out, and I probably need to turn off my phone, and it's not going to be as bad as I think it is. magic.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's amazing.
And my favorite
Right.
thing, actually, not that, we're talking about purpose differing and maybe purpose placed on them, but, parents know, they're intuitive and they know a lot of times what needs to happen, if not way more than me, because I don't know all the context. My favorite thing is when the parent tells me one thing and I have that in my head and the child is in there, and then we get to a place where I haven't imposed what the parent thinks needs to happen. And sure enough, the child says, you know what, I probably need to do this. And I know that is exactly what
Right.
the parent has said. They listen to you.
Right.
And they're going to incorporate some of those ideas. I think that, going back to the problem is if it's, they call it helicopter parenting, right? They're just like taking out everything in their way and they don't actually get to try it for themselves. It is possibly a good thing for them to come up with a bad idea, put it into practice, and then find out it didn't work. And then they have to try again. And that's any employee you want to hire, right? Somebody who's going to be able to come up against the thing and fail and figure out how to overcome it again.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, in imagining that conversation of how badly I want to confront what I would deem as irresponsible, or, what do you mean they don't like you? You're making, like the resisting the temptation to jump in and confront those things and actually empower them. Because really what you're describing is a way of, you're really showing them dignity, that you're empowered as an agent, of your own destiny.
Yeah.
Like, that's really what you're saying. Like, I believe you've got the power to navigate this to get where you want to go. Where do you want to go? How do you want to respond? And it's really hard to do because, and they're going to make mistakes in that too. They're not always going to choose properly. And it may take 4, 5, 6, 7 times or failures. So having to navigate that is not always easy. The other thing that I kind of drawn back where you started, of when we impose purpose on our kids, or we've got a vision or a picture. So how do we continue to challenge as a parent our own motives for what we're trying to direct them toward, and discerning when I'm putting something on them versus inviting them into something.
Do you have an example that you've seen with your own kids, if you're able to share?
The easy one, I think, yes, they're probably too nuanced, but like the easy one is athletics for boys, of like, wanting my son to play all the sports, and not being comfortable or feeling less comfortable when they quit one of those sports instead of playing all 3. And it's like, well, where's that coming from? Because that was part of the framework that I grew up in.
And there was all of these things.
Yeah, there was meaning in playing all of them. There was meaning in, and I put then some developmental value on that. Or conversely, if you quit something, that's a negative or less desirable mindset or approach. So, and then today, you amplify that today with the degree of intensity around each of these sports, which is even different than when I grew up. So that's an easy one, I think, that I see and hear in terms of expectation of performance, but may not align with what the kid is interested in or what they might want to pursue.
I agree.
Thoughts on that? How do we avoid that?
You can teach me. I'm not there yet with the age of my child, but yeah, I when you give the sports example, one of the things that has been true in my adult life is that my idea of what my sports playing was going to be like as a high schooler is different now, and I've actually seen like, I want to keep playing sports after college, right? A lot of why we say you need to play a sport is so that you could possibly get a college scholarship. You probably won't make it to the NFL, but like definitely you could do D3 and get some money, right? But as an adult, I realized like that I want to play sports after college. I never played in college because I wasn't that good. But man, I've actually enjoyed some forms of exercise in my adult years. I look at my wife who grew up swimming and is a very strong swimmer. It's like, you can do that for your whole life. So I wonder what the kind of, when you think about virtue or integrity or purpose, or what's the bigger picture if you took this out 30 years?
Right.
When you think about your child.
Right.
Do you really want them playing football for 30 years? Some parents actually would, if they knew the risks of people die earlier. I think there's research on that. But if you want them to be healthy, then I'd be way quicker to say, hey, I don't care what sport you do. I want you to be able to get exercise in your schedule.
To be active.
And if that's yoga, who cares? Yoga's great. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the extrapolating that over a 30-year period, long term, and there is so much pressure and emphasis in many of our contexts around college, and now with the escalated costs of college, now there's more emphasis on scholarships and earning scholarships by any means necessary. So that creates this added pressure to perform and produce on the field or on the court. So it does narrow, so then you hear people be like, well, and I've said this to my my daughters of golf scholarships for girls, apparently those are pretty lucrative and easier to get. So you should pursue golf. Like, I don't want to golf. It's like, think about it. Just think about it. But it's like that drives so much of our thinking. But to your point about motivation, that is not going to be as intrinsically motivating to them. So really having to reframe. And so what if that means they have to go to a smaller college, or they don't get the same college experience that you had, or they, so again, back to that, how's this reflecting on me? I think all those things are pretty material in the course of the conversation and really powerful. So I guess the bigger point that we might be making is really take inventory on some of these stances that you're taking as a parent and discern how much of that is about my image, my vanity, my sense of security, whatever you would title it, but because that can really wreak havoc in our relationship with our kids, I think.
Yeah, and going back to what you said, and knowing that the struggle is going to be the most growing for them.
Right.
Saying, oh, no, you're going to do 3 sports instead of you have to pick one, and that's going to be a really challenging decision for you to choose. And maybe, the major thing, going back to that, how many parents would say, kind of in this motivational interview, in this reflective, let's be empathetic to, we were probably there at one point, and go, man, with all of these majors in all of these schools, I could feel really overwhelmed. I wonder how you're going to figure that out. I bet you can. Empowering, being empathetic in that moment, and going, I can't make that decision for you. It's a decision you might have to make. And one of my favorite stories actually about just even this transition from high school to college and what does that look like is a guy I knew whose parents were very vocal. And we should interview them. And they said, you get C's in high school. We will not pay for college. You can go to college if you want. But what we are seeing is that you aren't an academically minded person. We're not saying you're dumb. We're just saying we have limited resources. We will pay for you to go to welding school. Wisely, he said, okay, 9 months later, he bought a new Jeep and he was making more money on the set of a TV show welding their frames than his dad was.
Right. Yep.
Sounds pretty successful to me.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? He can always go back to college, but man, is that empowering. Yeah, I could have done what everybody else was saying, but I wisely took instruction. I said, this could give me some purpose for a little while, and now the rest of his life is set up. I did something really hard. I gained a skill, and there's more time to go back to get education if I want to. I can't even imagine where this guy's going to be.
And the emotional sobriety of the parents to be able to live within those limits and to hold those boundaries, I think is very impressive. That would be a great conversation to have, because I don't know that many parents feel that like they have permission to actually hold some of those lines within limitations and it not be a threat, right? Like not, not using that as a threat, but saying these are your options. Either are good, no, we're not going to think less of you regardless, but based on these factors, here's what we will or won't or can or can't do. And you live within those parameters. Really powerful. Good stuff, man. Much more to be said on all of those dynamics. Hopefully it's been thought-provoking for those listening or watching, but really grateful for the work that you do, courageous work you do with the families, because I do think, you don't have to look very far to see how complex and challenging it is for parents and kids. And so I think the strengthening of that relationship becomes the kind of the superpower of the influence that we have with them for the longest period of time. And so really cultivating that versus I would say trying to control it, so cultivate it, developing it becomes really, really vital. So thank you for your insight and for the work you do.
Absolutely.